Good afternoon, and welcome to the Naval Order Continental Commandery. We're here today as part of our virtual lecture series. This has been some events that we've been doing now for the past 6 months or so, and had a lot of great speakers with us, and a lot of opportunity to talk about naval history, Coast Guard history, the sea services, and have had really great response, and we're happy to have you with us. Today we've got a special guest with us. We have Miss Denise Krepp, who's coming to us from the Navy Navy History and Heritage Command, and she'll talk a little bit about the new Navy Museum. But before we get started, my name is Aaron Bresnahan, retired captain, here the commander for the Continental Commandery. And one of the things that we're really big on within the Naval Order is promoting the history of the sea services. For those of you that may not know about the Naval Order was established on the 4th of July in 1890, and it was set up as an organization that was really about sharing a common interest in naval and maritime history. It was set up in Boston, Massachusetts. And the main mission of the order is to preserve, promote, celebrate, and enjoy our nation's sea services and heritage. One of the things that we try to do is commemorate our heroes and important historical events. We try to support the study of naval history through writing, speaking, and educational events. We also try to preserve sea service historical artifacts and documents and monuments, and we also try to promote camaraderie. And we have companions throughout the United States that come together for events, whether it's listening to speakers or lunches or dinners, and we also have annual meetings where we come together and we share. But the one thing that makes us unique is we're the oldest American hereditary exclusively naval society, and we're dedicated to really encouraging the promotion and preservation of the history of the sea services. And our linkage with all our predecessors forges a common bond, and we really want to focus on being responsible, honorable service to this country. So again, thank you so much for joining us, for being with us, and hopefully learning today a bit more about what we're doing in this nation and how you could be part of it. So thank you so much. So again, I mentioned that we do have a special guest with us, and Ms. Krepp, she's going to be talking again about where we see the future of the Navy Museum, and also giving a little bit of insight into the sort of the discussion that we've been having about how we name some of our bases and sort of the history that we have there. But I'll let her go into more detail on that. Just as a little bit of background, she began her career as an active duty Coast Guard officer. And after September 11th, 2001, she helped create the Transportation Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security Committee. During the Obama administration, Ms. Krepp served as the Maritime Administration Chief Counsel, and she also was a special counsel to the Department of Transportation. Now Ms. Krepp is also an elected advisory commissioner in Washington, D.C. So she brings a wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience, and right now she's on the Director's Action Group within the Navy History and Heritage Command. So without further ado, I am happy to welcome her with us, and
Hi.
Certainly thank you for joining.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And so for folks that are listening today, I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm never one to give a straight PowerPoint presentation because, well, when I received them when I was a JO, I kind of fell asleep. So here's my request of you. As I talk, please send in questions. Please, stop me and say, hey, wait a second, I'd like more information. How does this apply to me? How can I be helpful? So please ask questions, because if you don't, then I'm going to put my former professor hat on, because I taught for many years, and I'll be like, and what do you think? So here's the deal. I won't ask that question if you ask me questions. Okay. All right. So
All right. And for those of you online, you can ask your questions. There's a chat function. Hopefully you can see that either on the Facebook Live or on the YouTube. So feel free to add your questions as they come up, and then we'll be able to share those with her as they they arise. So
Please do. All right. How about we go to the first slide?
yeah.
Okay.
Guess we need to back up one maybe to the intro.
Oh, that's fine.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. So, all right. So we got the first slide. All right. So I work for the Naval History and Heritage Command, and the Naval History and Heritage Command is a command in Washington, D.C., at the Washington Navy Yard. And we are an amazing command. If you haven't had a chance, please come visit us. We have the archives, we have the library, we have art, we have underwater archaeology, we have the Navy's history. And it's important history because it's a 220 plus year old history. So it's just a phenomenal command to be part of. So if you look at the next slide, let's go there. There was an announcement made by the former Secretary of the Navy on the 13th of October saying, we are going to build a new museum of the United States Navy. Okay, and this has been a dream for about 60 years of former secretaries, former CNOs who said, you know what, this is really important. We really need to talk about the history. We really need to build a museum that talks about the Navy, because right now the facility is behind walls. Most folks can't get to it. Most folks, if they don't have a CAT card, can't see it. And that's unfortunate because, we want to teach people, we want to tell the story of the Navy. So if you go to the next slide, okay, so this is where we say everybody else has a museum, and they do. So by the way, I'm looking down and looking up at the same time. So the Air Force has an amazing facility in Dayton, Ohio. If you haven't been there, oh my gosh, go. I took my daughters there a couple of years ago. You can spend 2 days there and you learn everything from the birth of aviation and Wilbur Wright to the current, the planes. You can go on to the presidential planes. You can do everything there for the Air Force. You go to the Marine Corps Museum, a similar experience. It's down in Quantico. You go to the Army. Wow, that is an amazing facility at Fort Belvoir. I had the opportunity to go see it. And to be honest with you, my favorite exhibit there was Brats to Boots. I'm an Army brat. My parents were both Army officers, so I was really excited to see how they brought in the fact that most of us who served come from families who served. So it was just a really neat exhibit, and it's new and it's open and people can see it. The Coast Guard, my service, is building a museum in New London. That's going to happen. That's going to take a couple of years, but they're doing it. And then we go and we look at what the Navy has. Again, the current museum, which is super, super cool, isn't open to everybody. I had the opportunity of chaperoning 2 trips to the museum, but in order to do that, we had to fill out security paperwork. And most parents were like, why do I have to fill out security paperwork to go to a Navy museum? Well, you have to do that because it's in a military facility. The building that we're looking at building is off the Navy Yard. It has the ability for people to come in and see it. And that's what's super exciting about this. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far? I'm seeing a screen that says more questions. Uh-oh, folks, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to ask you questions. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So here's the campus vision, and I'll kind of read it off and talk to you about it. It's going to deliver critical information capabilities. It's going to teach history lessons. We're learning from our past, and we're educating people. What I said, we have the archives. We have the archives. We have all of these papers and documents that go back to the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the War of 1898, World War I, World War II. We have that, and we want to share that information so that people can say, hey, what happened 100 years ago? Are there any lessons learned that we can take from 100 years ago that we can apply to today? I don't know, but that's the type of thing we want to give scholars the ability to look at. And so that's one of the things we're excited about. We're excited about educating through cutting edge technologies, live, digital, virtual. Okay, for me, the best exhibit right now at the museum, at least according to the 7-year-olds that I've taken, are the guns that are taken off so they can actually climb on board. And they're climbing, and it is the most amazing thing for a 7-year-old. And by the way, they can't destroy them because, well, you can't destroy a gun. But while the children are are climbing all over things. Parents are reading things, and it's a super exciting possibility. But again, people can't see it because they can't get on base. So that's, just critical for us to be able to share the message off the base. The placement of the museum is critical. We're looking at putting the museum in the vicinity of the Washington Navy Yard. So why are we doing that? We're doing that because a couple things. One, it's near 2 metros. So for folks who have been stationed in Washington, D.C., you guys know where the Eastern Market Metro Station is, and you know where the Federal Center Southwest Metro Station is. So you've got the green, the orange, and the blue lines. You've got people right there that they'll be able to come in. You've got the neighborhood. The Washington Navy Yard has been here for 220 years. It is a... when you look at the museums I talked about in the Marines and the Air Force and the others, they've been in those communities, but they haven't been as long as the Navy has been here in Washington, D.C. I mean, if you look at the local community that we're in, Admiral Tenji House, it's the CNO's house. He's buried about 1.5 miles away at Congressional Cemetery. Barney Circle, again, part of our neighborhood, named after Admiral Barney. The workers who built the Washington Navy Yard, the workers who were employed on the Washington Navy Yard have been part of this community. So that's why we're really excited to have everything here in Washington, D.C. Then we're looking at, again, the historical context. Again, applying lessons learned, sharing information, just being a valuable resource to the CNO, to the SECNAV, to Congress, by the way, 1.5 miles, to the neighbors, to veterans. Again, it's all going to be part of this campus vision. And that's why it's just super, super exciting. Now, if you go, let's see if I'm doing this right. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about what we've done so far in 2020. The secretary announced the new museum. That had to be the first part. We had to obtain funding. If you look at that, we've got funding for fiscal year 20, for 21, for 22. Then we've got to have a lead fundraiser, because it's going to be fundraisers and a fundraising entity, a 501c3, that we're going to partner with to raise the money for this. And that's going to be very similar to what the Army did and the Air Force did and the Marine Corps did. I mean, it takes money, and that's what's going to happen is they'll be the fundraising arm. And then we're talking about an execution of the engagement plan. And that's, quite frankly, one of the reasons I'm excited to not only give this presentation to you, but I'm really hoping you're going to ask me questions, because I'd like to learn from you. What do you think should be in this museum? What is of critical importance? I mean, I come from the JAG community. Yes, I realize Shakespeare said, kill all the lawyers, but a couple of us, it can be pretty cool. But, I would like to learn from you. What do the SWOs think? What do the SUPPOs think? What do the aviators think? I mean, what do you want in your museum? Because let's face it, this is your museum. This is a Navy museum. So kind of hoping that we'll have some questions pop up here. Aaron, has anybody asked questions?
Yeah, actually, we did have one person who had asked the question of, have you picked the location, or where will it be? Has the land been purchased, or is it still something that has to be acquired? I guess they're wondering if it's going to be somewhere near the Nationals Park or right near the Naval Yard. I guess that's probably the intent of the question.
That is a really, really good question, because how do you build a museum if you don't have the land? We don't have the land right now. And the goal is to acquire the land in the vicinity of the Washington Navy Yard. So yes, it'll be next to us. We don't have the land. And that's what we're working with the city of Washington and with others to acquire the land. I mean, that's what has to happen. But that is part of what we're working on. So money, yes. Land, yes. Making sure that our friends on the Hill like what we're doing. Yes, that is also part of it. It is making sure that we get what we need for this. Yes.
Okay. And then, yeah, appreciate that. So I'm assuming that either the land would be purchased or maybe ceded from the city or somehow arranged for. But I guess there's another question also being asked. What do you foresee being the staffing of the museum? In other words, would it be manned or operated by personnel, or would it be maybe NAF or some personnel from the Navy History and Heritage Command?
So,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
The folks who are going to staff it will come from NHHC, so we will grow, but we have a really amazing core group of men and women led by Dave Adams, who's a retired captain, and Chris Renfro, also retired captain. They're beginning to grow and expand, and we're going to do something that's a little bit different. So the Army ended up putting people at Fort Belvoir. Quantico ended up, kind of having to get additional folks. We have a base here in Washington, D.C. We have the archivists already. We have the librarians. We have the base. And so we'll use that to staff and build and to grow the museum. Other questions?
I guess one other question is, why do you think it's taken so long for something like this to happen? I know maybe in the old days people would have had much easier access to the Navy Yard, but having a museum inside of a military base is from a security standpoint, probably hard for anyone to try to deal with. So why hasn't there, or why has it taken so long for this type of a museum to be developed?
I think it's hard. I mean, the desire has always been there. If you saw on the first slide, people have said for 60 years, but it's the ability to say, all right, we want the land, we have the ability to staff up, we have the ability to move out. And that's really what has coalesced over this past year. I mean, having the secretary sign the memo and make the announcement was critical. We had to have that first, and then we could go out with the fundraiser and do that. So I have to say, many thanks to former Secretary Braithwaite for really kicking this off and moving it. And we have a lot of support from the current CNO, who has been very supportive of this. And, the current leadership is just saying, just keep on going, just move out, please. More questions?
I guess another question is related to, you mentioned all of the archives that you have and all the materials that you have. Is there already a concept of, how the displays will be looked? Or, nowadays you have a lot of interactive exhibits and you have a lot of, sort of being able to actually play with the material or interface with it. How does the leadership foresee the future museum, and will there be children specific exhibits? Will there be things for veterans or service members? So maybe you could share.
One of the things we're going to be working on is engagement with the various communities. So we'll talk to the aviation community, we'll talk to the SWOs, we'll talk to the submarine guys and gals. So we're trying to find out first from them what they would like to see in their various exhibits. So we're kind of in the information gathering point, and then with that going out. So yes, we have an idea of what we would like, but again, this is the Navy Museum, so we're seeking input from folks. So we have ideas, but what are things that are important to other people? I mean, and so it's kind of a push-pull situation right now. And it's very similar to what the Coast Guard has done as well, of going out and saying, all right, let's make sure that we cover all of the components and making sure that nobody is left out. So that's why, again, we're in the collecting mode in the people and the assets and the battles. So that's what we're focusing on. Are there other questions? Okay, so Aaron, I have a question for you. In your role with the Naval Order, what would be the first thing you would say I need to have, or you should put in this museum, Denise?
Well, going back to sort of the mission, as I mentioned, about preserving the heritage of the sea services, I think one of the things that we talk about with the Navy, as you mentioned, you have materials going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and you have probably a huge archive of materials from the evolution of the Navy over time. So I think looking at the Naval Order, one of the things that we try to do is to also look for those little nuggets of things that maybe people don't know about. Things that are like, wow, I never realized that the Navy had something to do with, whether it has to do with the evolution of technology, or it has to do with the evolution of, seamen, or, sailors or officers over time, what kind of impacts individuals have made. So it's also about kind of finding those nuggets of history that are buried in a bottom drawer, or, sitting somewhere where people, can get access to it and know more about it.
Okay. Would there be a particular part in history that you'd be interested in, or just kind of general, let's find some good nuggets?
Well, I think, one of the things, like I've been to, well, for instance, down in Pensacola, there's the Naval Flight Museum. So you have a lot of displays of aircraft. You have, what it's like to be on an aircraft carrier. I've also been to the Smithsonian and been able to see all the neat stuff about, the evolution of the nation. So I think when I think about the Naval Museum and the types of things, as you say, it's so comprehensive to think about all the 26 or so different communities that we have, and whether it's the JAG community or the surface community or submarine community. I guess you could probably almost go crazy with having too much information. So it's also about how you can focus on it in a way that gives people, again, a realization of how, as the Navy has evolved, and the history that we've preserved, it's again, highlighting those treasures that really, help people understand how unique and how powerful the Navy is, and the impact it makes, securing our nation, and also making sure that we have freedom of the seas and power projection, and some of those types of themes.
Well, and I think you hear Admiral Cox say absolutely, because when we look to the past, we can see the future, and we can use the past to help people understand what the Navy does. I was really surprised when I'll go back to the field trip that I chaperoned to the museum a couple of years ago. And I went to the class ahead of time, and, again, 7th and 8th graders. And I said, all right, what do you think the Navy is? And I got a lot of hands raised, and like, pirates, like, not exactly, but we could go there as a 7-year-old. But then, I took them to the museum, and I came back and said, all right, now what do you think? What did you learn? And they came back, and it was just like words were tripping out of their mouths about, baseball, because there's a really cool exhibit on baseball at the museum. They were talking about, the underwater part that the Navy has. They were talking about the sails. And that's, what we're trying to do is really jazz people up and say, hey, this is a really cool place. And that's part of the reason we're thrilled to be able to share it here at in the vicinity of the Washington Navy Yard, because that's what this neighborhood has been for 220 years. So we're super excited about making it an experience where people can have hands-on, but also one that's a learning environment as well. What other recommendations would you have for us?
Well, actually, there's a couple of other questions that have come up that might address that. We did have one question that came in that says, will the museum also house all the archive materials currently warehoused in the Navy Yard? And what are the plans for archiving historically relevant digital records?
Oh, that is a really good question. That is a really good question. Okay, so the majority of that, at least for right now, is going to stay where we are. Digitizing. Wow, that is a hot topic, because NARA requires all of the information to be digitized. And that's making sure that we have the ability to do that. And that's something that had the Histories and Archives Division is working on right now, to make sure that not only do we digitize the information, but to make sure that people can have access to it. So that's a big topic we're working on right now.
Okay. Yeah, another question came up. The Naval Picture / Art Gallery is being, I guess, I guess, perceived as being gutted at the Navy Yard. Will the artwork and the pictures from decommissioned ships be housed at the new museum?
Okay. Yes, the building has been gutted. Yes, but it's being rehabbed. It's being rehabbed right now, and it'll be reopened in the next couple of years. So yes, we will make sure that all the artwork is protected, and yes, we will make sure that it goes back to where it is. And that should happen in the next couple of years. Will all the artwork be in the museum? No. Some of it, absolutely, but all of it, no. We'll continue to have it where we have it here at NHHC.
Okay. And then there was another question, or at least it was a comment that mentioned a lot of times people have had their retirement ceremonies, especially being on the Navy Yard and where you have the view of the river just outside the museum. And obviously there's kind of like a courtyard and an area where I guess people have had retirement ceremonies and been able to share with their families sort of the Navy experience. How do you see that, if we're now going to have the museum outside the Navy Yard and you're kind of more open to the public, do you foresee the ability to have those kind of experiences for service members?
Absolutely. So that's one of the goals we have for the new museum is to be an event space. So similar to what the Army is doing right now over with theirs. I mean, they're holding weddings, they're holding retirement ceremonies, they're holding change of command ceremonies. So yes, we do envision having the ability to use the new museum as an event space.
Okay.
In addition to clearly having the ability to do something similar with the current facility that we have. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I've also visited the Marine Corps Museum down in Quantico, and as when you drive up there, it's quite impressive to see the outside of the building, and then they do have spaces there as well for public events. So I guess it really depends on the location and how much land you have, I suppose.
Well, one of the reasons we'd like to put the museum in the vicinity of the Washington Navy Yard is the ability for people to take the metro. To be able to take the metro, the green, the orange, and the blue line to get there. Clearly, people will be driving cars, and there will be hopefully a parking lot or parking facility that'll be there. And still got to work about buses and figure out where the tour buses, because right now when the children come here for their 7th and 8th grade visit to Washington D.C., it's very hard for them to come to the Navy Museum because, again, behind the walls. But in the future, when it's off the base, then what we'd really like to do is be a place for all the 8th graders to come to Washington, D.C. to learn about the city and to learn about our government. So we're really excited about this. Okay, next question.
Yeah, next question, it actually had to do with, I think this is really about how you can get more materials or how the public can be involved. But I guess the question is there going to be a program that encourages families to give, and this is in quotes, grandpa's old war letters to the museum? So I know the Navy Memorial, for instance, has the ability for you to kind of tell your story and be captured as, your history as a service member. But is there a way to get, I guess, additional material from the public about, what they might have done during World War II or Vietnam War or even more recently in the Gulf War? Is there any kind of initiative like that?
That one I don't know of, but I can go back and ask. I do know that there are 2 different initiatives that I would encourage folks to work with. So one, the Library of Congress has a Veterans Oral History program, and they're collecting the oral histories. So I would definitely encourage folks to look at that program. Again, it's the Library of Congress Veterans Oral History program. And then the Women in Military Service for America Foundation is also collecting oral histories from women who have served. There have been about 3 million women in the United States who are serving and have served as veterans. So they're collecting. With regards to whether or not we will, I can't give you an answer right now, but happy to go back and find one for you. Okay, next question.
All right. Yeah, the next question is from one of our companions asking, how do you plan to be more inclusive of the enlisted ranks? I mean, you already mentioned a couple of admirals made comments and Secretary of the Navy made comments and the CNO made comments, but how do we really focus more on the role of enlisted personnel in the development of the Navy, or or how will there be a special focus
Well,
on that contribution?
let's look at the makeup of the Navy. The majority of the individuals who serve in the Navy are enlisted, so they clearly have to be part of that. I'm lucky. My grandfather was a Navy enlisted sailor during World War II, so I clearly respect for the enlisted community. And my grandfather, bless his soul, would come back and haunt me if I didn't make sure that the enlisted personnel were part of this. So yes, the enlisted sailors will have a part of this museum, and clearly have to have a part in planning it. So yes, I can, without a doubt, yes, they'll be part.
No, right, and no, and that's a critical follow-up as well, is really how, I mean, quite often, maybe the MCPON gives input, and there might be some chiefs or senior enlisted leaders that are involved, and I guess the question would be how are you going to bring more people into the planning stage to get those inputs?
Well, you're right. We need to do that, and that means that we affirmatively have to go out to the MCPON, to the senior enlisted, and say, what do you think we should have here? But again, if the majority of the sailors are enlisted, then we need to go to all the sailors and say, what do you think we should have in here? What is important to you? Or we could also ask, why did you join the Navy? And can you share your story as a way to encourage others to come in? So yes, we do have a role. We do have a responsibility to make sure that enlisted and officers tell their stories, and we get input from them. More questions?
There was another question that also, you mentioned before that there was going to be a charity or a 501c3 or
Yes,
whatever designation that would be working towards fundraising. I guess for clarification, is the intent that the Navy would have money appropriated for putting the museum together, or is it solely going to be built through donations?
so the 501c3, and I'm reading this off now to make sure I get the name right. It's the Navy Museum Development Foundation. It's being led by Vice Admiral Konetsky. He will be helping raise the funds. It'll be private dollars that will help build the museum. So there are appropriated dollars that have been used and are continuing to be used for the campus program. And again, that office is being led by Dave Adams and Chris Renfro, both retired Navy captains. So it'll be both. But again, looking towards a lot of fundraising that's going to have to occur over the next couple of years.
Okay, another comment. This was a second comment about the retirement ceremonies, and you did mention, at least at the current Navy Museum, there's also places where people can have space and have receptions. So I'm assuming that also the concept would be that in addition to having like a venue for an event, you would also have breakout spaces and places that the public can use.
Yes. So one of the neat things we saw at the Army Museum, and we went and visited them last fall, was how they're using their space and how they're using, because while it is a big building, it's still small. So they're figuring out how to put things on wheels so you can move things out and in to customize the space. So that's what we're looking at doing. Of how do we maximize the space that we have for exhibits, but also ensure that it can be a venue for retirement ceremonies. But then, are there local entities that could come in? Possibly, but how do we give them the ability to use the space? That's just what we're trying to figure out right now.
Okay. Also, we have Captain Fred Passman with us. He's part of our Continental Commandery, and he actually had a few questions he also wanted to ask you. So I'm going to bring him into the stream. So I'll add him here to the chat. Okay. So Fred, hopefully you can hear us and we can see you. So if you had any questions,
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Denise. Excellent so far. As you're speaking, I have a page worth of questions. One, having recently visited the World War II Museum.
Yep.
It's very immersive.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the footprint is substantial, and clearly they raised quite a bit of that section of the New Orleans neighborhood in which it's been. And so, is it fair to assume, or can you tell me a little bit about the community engagement effort that's been embarked on in order to win the support of the folks who are likely to be displaced when we acquire the land?
So that's not going to happen. We're not displacing people. We'll be
Okay.
going empty.
Okay, so there's open space in the
Yes.
property that's targeted. That's
Yes.
excellent. And can you speak a little bit to the lessons that you've learned from the recently stood up museums like the World War II Museum, the Marine Museum? Because there's so much technology that's become available to museum curators in just the past decade in terms of virtual reality opportunities. I was recently in a museum in Zurich where using the virtual reality headset, goggles, was able to be in a hot air balloon over the Peruvian desert, hieroglyphs, where you're seeing these acres of, these alien landing zones, we'll call them. But I'm thinking of giving visitors the opportunity to get the virtual experience of standing on the deck of a tin can, of parachuting, doing a high-low jump, things like that. Is that part of the thinking going on?
Well, in order to make that happen, we have to lay the power lines. So that's one of the lessons learned of, if you are ambitious, and that is ambitious, make sure that you have laid all the power lines and have enough electricity, and make sure that you call Pepco ahead of time and go, we may need a little bit more than we already have right now. So that was some of the lessons learned of walk your way back and figure what you have to do to make sure you can do that. So yes, and so it's walking way back of what do you need in order to get to that technology, but also how much is it going to cost, and how do we make that happen? So yes, we definitely had conversations with the Army, because they're the newest, and they've been very generous about sharing lessons learned.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then in terms of enlisted engagement, have you had any conversations with the members of the Association of the United States Navy, just upriver there over in, what's that small town where Annapolis is located? Oh, yes, Annapolis.
That was, yeah. We are just starting engagement. You guys are the first ones.
Okay.
When the command said, hey, when I got the email from Aaron, would you like to do this? The command's like, yes, we need to get out. So yeah, we are just beginning all of the engagement right now.
Excellent. The other piece to that engagement, in some cities, again, every naval order commandery has its own personality, its own gestalt, even though we share some common visions. And at some cities, naval order members play a fairly active role as docents of historical sites. And so I would plant that seed as an opportunity, since the DC area has a very active naval order commandery.
That sounds great. I mean, we need them, because it's a good way to connect with people. There's trying to remember the name of the museum. Is it the Mighty Eighth that's down right outside of Savannah, Georgia? It talks about the, I think it is the Eighth. But anyway, I had the opportunity of going there with my kids about 2 years ago, and we met some of the docents. The docents had served as aviators during World War II. And to be able to be like, and this is what I did, and this is what my friends did. It's like, wow. I mean, it just kind of brings things to life. So absolutely, we have to have the ability to have people to connect with the stories, and having docents who've lived there and been there, that's an important thing to do. Yes.
Terrific. So I think you already spoke to this a little bit, but kind of where is the team in terms of space conceptualization?
Okay, you lost me on that one. Is it like?
Okay, so when
or
I
is
think
it-
of a museum space, I can have, the schematic we showed, and I think I can put it back up on the screen without losing you, is, let me go to the next slide.
You probably, yeah,
Here.
that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
this slide, so that's a space conceptualization. I've got a large open space. I've got various vintage aircraft suspended from the ceiling. And so there are things like people moving from one space to another,
Okay.
maybe walking through an LCVM or a PT boat or a, a cutaway section of one of those types of craft as an example of conceptualizing the space.
So, all right,
Where are we on those
we're,
sorts of concept development?
we're working on that. We've been talking about that, and there are definitely documents. And by the way, we talk about conceptualizing all parts of the Navy. So you're looking at a photo with which the aviators would probably like it
Sure.
right now. The submarine's like, hello, wait about us. Yes, we are conceptualizing it to include all communities in the Navy. We absolutely have to do that.
And again, when we talk about communities, we often think in terms of the aviators, the submariners, the surface warriors, the special operators. And of course, within each of those communities, we have our sub-communities. So if you talk to, Gator Navy versus small boy surface warfare versus amphibs, versus, let's say, large crafts, what I call floating islands, we're the same Navy, but we're very different navies, and the experiences are also dramatically different. How is that playing into, you only are going to have so many square feet in which to work. So has there been some conceptualization how so many different ways of being in the Navy are going to be represented, along with the historical component?
We're working on it. And part of that, and that's,
Sure.
I mean, in saying, okay, in order to make sure we don't forget anybody or anything, we have to write everything down on paper and then go back and go, okay, we have so many examples, but we have this amount of room. How do we do this and how do we prioritize it? So that's the discussion that's being had right now as we go through. Yeah, but we have to write it down on paper first.
Of course. I just wanted, maybe you could expand a little bit on how that process is playing out, who the stakeholders are participating in that process, and then what you see as the timeline for that process.
Well, that's going to probably take about a year or two. And making sure that we talk to everybody. Again, you guys are the first ones, which is why I'm asking you questions while you're asking me questions and I'm writing them down.
Sure.
Like, make sure I don't forget this. But yeah, it's having this conversation to make sure we don't forget anything. And that's key to this. Capture it, write it down, and then at some point we're probably gonna have a room full of just paper and just be checking everything off.
Okay, great. Aaron, any new questions coming in from the comments?
Well, yeah, we definitely had a few people from the National Capital Commandery who said they'd be more than happy to help out and to be docents and to get involved. So
great, thank
definitely
you.
have some people there that are eager and anxious to participate.
Thanks for stepping up, guys.
Yeah, we need all the help that they can provide. That's for sure. I guess one question that did come up is, will this museum also be, let's say, a research destination? So in other words, if someone is wanting to write a book about naval history, or if, will there be that type of research access or some kind of a library or something that people would be able to get more information?
We're talking about that. We're trying to figure that out right now, because we clearly have all the books where we are right now. And if we put all the books in the new museum, that means it takes away from exhibit space. So we're trying to figure out, we're just trying to figure out how to do this, and make sure that people can have the access to the books, but we still have the room for the exhibit. So figuring it out. I know it's a squishy answer, but figuring it out.
I hate to ask yes/no questions, but that begs the question, looking, let's say, 10 years in the future, is the plan to maintain the current facility as well as the new facility?
So the new facility will be a museum, but we still will have NHHC. So we're not giving up this land. That's for sure.
You wouldn't want to lose that building. That's classic.
It's a phenomenal building. Yes. Yeah.
And thinking about that building, I mean, obviously there's the waterfront that's just outside of it. Has there been any plans, especially when you're thinking about the location, to have some access to the waterfront? Because I think one of the things that's nice about the current museum is you also have the museum ship right there at the pier.
Oh, we don't anymore. The Berry left.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't been there in a while, but
Yeah. The Berry left a couple of years ago. Yeah, so there isn't a ship here. So that's the first one. But yes, we would like people to have access to the water, and that's part of the reason we're talking to the city, to make sure that, we learn from the city, how do they want to develop part of that land? Because it's clearly going to be a joint relationship of working to make sure that their interests are achieved just like the Navy's interests are achieved. Yeah.
Okay, and then another question. Obviously, the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. Is there any discussion about, having the Marine barracks right near the Navy Yard? And is there any discussion about how you also include the story of the Marine Corps in the museum?
That is the first time that question's come up. and I know that the Marines have their own museum, but the Marine Corps and the Navy Yard have both been here for a long time, and they both responded when a certain other country decided to come and say hi in 1814. Good question. I'll get back to you on that one. Just good question.
Yeah, and I know when you talk to the Marines, they definitely want everybody to know that they are a separate service and that, they have their own identity. But, it's one of those things where we're still all part of the Department of the Navy. So I would hope we could at least include, some reference to that relationship. There is another question that came in, especially when we talk about, the different communities. I mean, one thing that maybe people don't really hear a lot about is like, the medical corps or the nursing corps or the, any of those type of supporting organizations. You mentioned you were a JAG within the Coast Guard, but there's a lot of those communities that maybe people don't really know as much about. So how do you see that developing?
Well, they have to be. They absolutely have to be part of this discussion, and they have to be part of the story. Navy medicine is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year. Many procedures and medicines that are used in the civilian world came out of Navy medicine. So yes, we should definitely be telling the story of Navy medicine, the story of the Navy nurses and the 12 anchors in World War II. Absolutely. They are a critical part of this story. They have been part of the Navy, the nursing corps for over 100 years, the doctors and Navy medicine over 150 years. So yes, let's also not forget about the chaplains. We need to cover every single component of the Navy, and that's what we're working to do.
And another question came in about the relationship, or if there is any relationship or any kind of overlap with the U.S. Navy Memorial. Obviously, there's a space already over near Capitol Hill where, you've got the flags and you have the museum and things like that. Is there any cooperation or coordination with the memorial?
I know that that NHHC has a good relationship with them. And I know that we'll be talking with them as we roll this museum out, but I can't give you more specifics than that.
Okay. And then I guess, again, with the Naval Order also promoting the, the history of the sea services, you asked me earlier some of the things that might be worth also including potentially. I mean, if we think back to the history of the U.S. Navy, it actually started out, as you know, during the Revolutionary War, where a lot of merchant vessels were given, they were privateers, or they were given, authorization to to get underway and defend the nation. Do you have any plans to talk about the relationship of the merchant marine, or even today where we have strategic sea lift, or the relationship with the Maritime Administration when it comes to the logistics of how we go to war and how we support the sea, our sea service in the Navy?
We're clearly looking at every part of the Navy, and there is a very important tie between the surge fleet that is connected between MSC and the Maritime Administration, my former agency. So absolutely, we need to go look at that story. We need to figure out how it's told, because the military logistics chain is critical. If you go to our museum and you look at the Korean War, the civilian vessels that accompanied the military vessels were over 300. I mean, in order to be successful, you have to have the civilian fleet accompany the military fleet in peacetime and war. So how do we tell that story? How do we tell the story of the men and women, many of whom were and are on active duty Navy sailors, but also have served as civilian mariners? So yes, absolutely. We need to look at that story too.
And knowing that the Maritime Administration also has their headquarters just outside the Navy Yard, I guess there's an opportunity there to, at least talk to each other and
yeah.
and how you can tell that joint story.
And there's always been a really good relationship. I mean, the former MARAD administrator was Admiral Busby was the former head of MSC and worked closely with Transcom. So absolutely. I mean, the Navy is it's an amazing agency with some phenomenal allies. And so just the ability to tell the Navy story and the ability to tell the Navy story working with others is just, it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're just really excited to do that and to work with folks to tell the story. So, yep, we'll get there and we'll work with folks.
All right. And then there was another question that was also asking if there's any updates. I know, is there any newsletter partnerships with either the Naval Academy Museum or the Naval Institute or even, other, colleges or universities?
Okay, so let's see. We've got 10 museums here within the Navy, and the Naval Academy Museum is one of is a Navy museum. So clearly we're going to be working with them. We've got USNI, which is a private entity. So yes, definitely we'll be talking with them. Other universities, I could see that coming up in the context of maybe ROTC, but are you thinking in another way? I'm just trying to figure out the link between the non-military schools.
Well, I think it's more about the fact that there are, as you say, a lot of organizations that try to tell the Navy story, and there's different outlets for information. But I think maybe the question is really related to, again, how you get the word out, how we share information, how we take advantage of different, ways of sharing and the different constituencies that we're serving.
Well, I can tell you from this conversation, what I've learned is that there are a lot of questions we didn't anticipate, to be very honest. And I'm very, I'm grateful for everybody who's been asking these questions, because we need to answer them. And I think as we go out and talk to more people are going to have questions. And the more people who ask those questions, the better this museum is going to be. So I want to say thank you for asking these questions. And we got a lot of work, but I think with everybody's partnership and willingness to help, we'll get there, and it's going to be a really good product.
Okay, and I guess one question that we have as a naval order as well is there the ability maybe for you to provide some information that we could include in our newsletter? Because as I mentioned in a conversation you and I had previously, we have about 1,000 active members, and we have others that also get our information in different ways. But would there be some material that maybe you could share with us that we could include in our newsletter?
Absolutely. And if you would like, regular updates, if folks would, we got to figure out how to provide regular updates. That is very clear from this conversation is how do we get the information out, and how do we get out in a timely manner so people just stay excited and want to help. So yes, absolutely. We'll figure that one out. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Okay, and we also do have a LinkedIn site, and we have Facebook sites, and we have other, we also have our own website where we post information too. So we'll certainly, raise awareness as much as we can as an organization. Um, I guess one other thing I did want to ask you about, and this was something that you had mentioned, you have, especially with the National Defense Authorization Bill that was recently, the veto that was overridden, that included also some discussion of renaming some military facilities and bases. I think you mentioned that you had a personal connection with some of the bases and that you were quite instrumental in advocating for change. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. And now I'm going to be speaking as a private citizen, and a private citizen whose family was instrumental in starting the Civil War. I had family members, including my great-great-grandfather was Howell Cobb, and he was president of the Confederate Congress. His brother, General T.R.R. Cobb, wrote the Confederate Constitution. And as a private citizen, I worked with Speaker Pelosi to remove his portrait from the U.S. Capitol because he, to be blunt, he committed treason. He went from being Speaker of the House of Representatives, Governor of Georgia, Secretary of Treasury, to being the President of the Confederate Congress. So worked with them on that. I worked with the Coast Guard again as a private citizen to get the Confederate flag off Coast Guard land, and I did that because not only was the Coast Guard my service, but my great-great-grandfather was their service secretary, and I don't think that the Confederate flag should be flying again as a private citizen on the Confederate land. And then let's go for the Army. My maiden name is Rucker. I am related to Edmund Rucker of Fort Rucker. I'm also related to Benning. And I, again, as a private citizen, was advocating for the past year for the renaming of Army bases. I can't be any more blunt. My family committed treason. They had to seek presidential pardons after the Civil War. And it's my personal belief that Army bases should be named for individuals who didn't commit treason. So again, private citizen making those statements.
I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's an important issue, especially in our country today. We really need to find ways to create unity and bring people together, and definitely appreciate the efforts that you made to to help us heal, and overcome these issues. And I'm sure from a personal standpoint, it was a lot of effort went into that to right, let's say, the wrongs of the past, and to really look towards a brighter future. So definitely appreciate your efforts there and your willingness to share as a private individual and for what you're trying to do to help the country.
I had a responsibility, I had a responsibility as the descendant of somebody who had to seek a presidential pardon for committing treason to right some wrongs. And that was, I started doing that after Charleston. And I've kept talking for 5 years and saying, again, as a private citizen, they took up arms. My family took up arms against U.S. soldiers. My great-great-grandfather, on his way out the door from being as Secretary of Treasury, sent a letter to the folks of Georgia recommending that they secede. What they did was wrong. And so my job as the descendant is to right the wrongs and to say we should have military bases, again, as a private citizen, that are named for individuals who are successful, who've honored our country. And hopefully that'll happen. So.
All right. Thanks for those comments and for, again, sharing with us. I just looking at the chat here to see any other comments. Some people definitely thanking you for your viewpoints and about your ancestry and what you've been doing. And again, people thanking you for sharing with us about the museum. It sounds like there's a whole lot of things that are going to be happening now over the coming years, a lot of fundraising, a lot of people hopefully being involved in the planning process. again, looking at the ways that our enlisted sailors have made a difference for the Navy and for the country, looking at the ways the different communities can be represented and partner with you as part of this process. But definitely excited to hear that we're going to have a new Navy museum right down there near the Navy Yard that people can easily access. And especially in today's security environment, being able to be open to the public and for people to learn about this great Navy that we have is really exciting. We thank you so much for being with us. Any final thoughts or anything else that we should think about as we start to wrap things up?
First of all, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to folks today. And then I have an ask for you. Would it be okay if I came back? Oh, please give me time. 9 months maybe, or a year. Okay, maybe 9 months, to come back and give you an update and to share and just to kind of seek your thoughts on the museum. Could we just kind of have
absolutely.
a kind of an ongoing relationship and how we work forward to doing this?
Absolutely. I think we definitely would love to see you come back, and I know Fred, he's excited to continue to follow up. Yeah, and
Cool.
we definitely have a situation here where anything that we can do to share with updates, or as Fred was asking earlier about the concept, or even some visualization to help whet the appetite of people to come by to visit. And then, as I mentioned before, we also have our local the National Capital Commandery. There's a lot of individuals there. Our local commander, his name is Bill Stiegel. He's also quite happy to be able to provide whatever efforts that they can, either as docents in the future, or if you just need volunteers and people to help out.
That would be great, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with him. We're a couple of years out from being a docent, so you don't have to be ready to do this tomorrow, but absolutely be ready to help and work with folks. So thank you very much, much appreciated. And when we have solved COVID, when everybody has a vaccine, I just encourage folks to come to the current Navy Yard, the current facility on the Navy Yard, and see it. I mean, this is your history. This is the Navy history. So please, if you get a chance, come see the current museum when we all have vaccines, because I want you to see the current one, and then I just want you to be super excited about seeing the future one. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, definitely, again, many thanks on behalf of myself, but also the Naval Order and the Continental Commandery. It was a really great discussion that we had. Lots of good questions. Obviously, you can see that there's a lot of interest in this, and we're certainly on standby to help. And anything we can do to share information and to support you, we'll definitely get back to you. I've been sharing your email address, so if anybody else does have a question, or maybe they wanted to ask something but didn't have a chance to, we'll also be sure that they can get in touch with you. But again, thanks so much for being with us. We're going to continue having these monthly lecture series, and we're going to have a new slate of presenters as time goes on. So definitely those of you in the audience, we ask you to come back and visit with us again, and to hear more about what we're doing as a Naval Order and the different causes that we're supporting. But as I said before, it's really about promoting and making the most out of the sea services and the history and the heritage. So definitely thank you for participating. Wish you all a good evening, and look forward to seeing you next time. Again, my name's Captain Aaron Bresnahan, and thank you so much for joining. Have a great evening.